Check Podcasts.
Hi, I'm Bruce Williams. I'm the CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to Chamber Chats, coming to you as always from here in the podcasting facilities at the Czech Media Group. I would like to begin, as always, acknowledging that I live and work in the ancestral land of the Lekwungen-speaking nations known to us as Songhees and Esquimalt nations. And Chamber Chats is made possible by the support of Island Savings, a division of First West Credit Union, who have a team of professionals with solutions as unique as your business. So for 22 and a half years, I have lived on Vancouver Island. For 22 and a half years, I've looked over at the majestic Olympic Mountains and seen the life that's over there in places like Port Angeles. I've flown over it. I've never been there. I've never gone to that until a very short time ago. I was kindly invited by the Port Angeles Chamber of Commerce to be the keynote speaker at their Christmas luncheon. So I made the trip and I finally got to see Port Angeles for the first time. And of course, getting there is a snap because one of the iconic ships on the West Coast gets you there and back, and that is MV Coho. We're going to talk today about Coho because it was my first trip on the Coho, which was so cool. We all know it to see it, and we all know it as well to hear it. When you hear that rattling around in the inner harbor, you know that the Coho is in town. Ryan Burles is with us. He is the president and chief operating officer of Ball Ferries. Ryan, how are you?
Very good, and thank you for inviting me.
It was so
Telling
cool.
Our story.
Yeah, it was so cool to finally be on board that ship. I can't believe how many times I've had the chance and never went, but it was really cool to see it. And I was just fascinated to find out some things about Ball and the parent company of Coho. It goes back over 200 years. Tell me about that.
That's correct. Yeah. Well, it started in 1818, and it started by 4 Quakers in New York City, and they would be taking cotton up from the Carolinas up to New York and then putting on British ships to go to Liverpool. And they were very, I guess, frustrated with the cost and the frequency of the ships leaving, and they weren't happy with it. So they formed their own shipping company, and it was the first registered US-owned shipping company in America. And they started to move ships across the Atlantic, and at one time had over 200 ships. And they had also at one time the fastest ship to cross the Atlantic. So they have a storied past, to say the least. There's songs and great stories about their captains and how tough and mean they were, and they probably were. And captains, I think, used to get 1/8 of the revenue, and of course, that's all to drive those ships. So yeah, and it was a great story. And the Ball Line was the name of that company.
And why Ball? Why is it called that?
Well, nobody really seems to know. There's different reasons. One reason that it seems to resonate with me is that on the foreshare sail, in the day when you didn't have radio, obviously, they used to look out and wait for ships coming across. And when they would look to the foresail, there'd be a marker, and in this case, a black ball. And that would mean that the port would be ready for, okay, we're going to have to unload this ship, because otherwise there is no way of knowing when it was coming. And of course, it could be 10 days or more difference. So that's why, so that they had markers on those foresails so they were easily identified.
Little known fact, or maybe you knew this, the first ever Chamber of Commerce in the world was created because of piracy on the high seas. And that was in France.
Wow.
In southern France, they got businesses together, say we have to do something about these pirates because they're plundering and they're cutting into our revenues. So there's a shipping connection right there. So it's come to the West Coast. There's been a number of different ports of call for Ball up and down the coast. Tell me about that.
Yes. So the grandson of that one of the Quakers came out here, Peabody, and he started the Puget Sound Navigation Company. Eventually, it became known as Ball Line, and it was took on the flag. So basically, all of Washington State Ferries was that company. So he really had all those short runs across that sound. And it eventually got bought out by Washington State in 1951. And he then moved some of his ships up to BC and actually created what would be now Horseshoe Bay to Nanaimo and Powell River to Comox runs. And then he was bought out again by the BC Ferries in 61.
Yeah, that was W.E.C. Bennett did that at the time, I believe.
That's correct.
So we're going to move up a little bit in the history here. 1928, that was a bit of a milestone year too. Tell me what happened in 1928.
Well, in 1928 was when the Black Ball flag and the Black Ball name became part of Puget Sound navigation. So in 28 was when that actual flag and basically all those little ferries across the sound, the Mosquito Fleet, as it was called, became known as the Black Ball
Yeah.
Line, and they all flew the Black Ball flag. And the reason we have that flag is because our owner, Mr. Atchison, was the freight manager for Black Ball Line, and he eventually bought the freight section of Black Ball Line from Captain Peabody, and eventually got his own ship, the Iroquois, to move freight in the Sound. And with that, he incorporated the Black Ball name and called it Black Ball Transport, but he put a white or gray circle around the black ball. So that's why we are called Black Ball Transport, and then eventually that Black Ball Ferry Line.
So this grand ship that we're talking about, the one that I finally got to ride on, was built and launched in 1959. So it's older than most of the people on Vancouver Island. But
Yeah.
but there was sort of other things happening in the 50s that led up to that. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So in the 50s, there was, well, in 47 to 51, the Chinook ran the Port Angeles to Victoria Run, and also to Seattle, and then a ship named the Kalakala. But um, as I mentioned, in 1951, the state bought out all of the interstate runs off of Black Ball, but they continued to run the international runs.
Yeah.
So that's why that happened.
You mentioned Kalakala. So one of the things that I discovered when I was in Port Angeles, I took a picture of a mural that's a picture
Yes.
of this is like a really interesting looking ship. Like it almost looks like
Yeah.
a spaceship. But what was the
It,
Kalakala? Tell me
it,
about that.
yeah, an interesting story to say the least. Yeah, it looked like a spaceship. It was Art Deco. It was thought out by Mrs. Peabody, who designed it actually. But they got the ship from a ship that was running in the Sacramento River. So it had a shallow hull, and they brought it up, extended her a bit, and then cut her off, and then put this Art Deco spaceship and ran it. So it had a lot of hype, but it was actually a very poor ship. It had a shallow hull, so it really listed. And actually, my wife's uncle wrote it, and it said it was a terrible ship, and a lot of people would get sick. So it didn't really actually work out. So it ran from 55 to about 58 on the Victoria to Port Angeles Seattle run.
Yeah, so with lack of a hull, it's basically the difference between being in a boat and sitting on a plank, because in the water,
That
it would
that
just kind of do this all the time, which
that
makes for kind of
exactly.
an interesting ride. Okay, this ship being built in 1959 is still in great shape. We're going to tell you how that happens next. Our guest today on Chamber Chats is Ryan Burles. He is the president and chief operating officer of Black Ball Ferries that operates the MV Coho, which again, Ryan crafted in 1959 and launched. It's an amazing shape. How does that happen? How did that happen?
Well, I think it happened. Well, first of all, it was well built. So because it was being built for freight, it was built with its ribs more or less. Instead of being 24 inches apart, that holding the deck and the hull, it's 18 inches apart. So if you go on the deck of the Coho, you'll see no deflections. So it was very well built and built to last. And then it was also back at the time when sailors were sailors, and they also worked on it, 365 days a year. So they just don't load the boats. They actually work on her, maintain her, nail gun her, go into the voids and make sure that she's maintained. And that's being kept that way from that time. The other thing is that as we had one ship, and as time went on, we obviously need to maintain that ship. So the pride of the crew and the pride of from the captains down to the chiefs to the deck and the engine room are paramount, and they love the ship, care for it. We've had three port captains in 64 years, and every one of them was excellent, and the one today is. And so we're very fortunate. We really have a deep, care for her, and it takes more than just care. Obviously, it's a lot of qualified people and a lot of good partners, and it is renowned for its care and quality as anybody who's been on it would know.
Yeah, it's immaculate. It's clean. It's fresh looking all the time. It's really something. Tell me about the transition then from freight to people.
Yeah, so Mr. Atchison, at the time he was moving freight, and he had seen that the World's Fair was going to be in Seattle in 1962. So around 55, I understand, he started to envision to build a ship for the World's Fair, and he was actually hoping to have it done by 58, but he did get it done by in 1959. Kind of a neat story that way, and how much he extended himself to do it. Was that when the price of steel went up, he didn't have enough money, and he couldn't get any more. But one of the unions we have was the Teamsters, and they lent him $250,000, which is a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
At the time, that ship cost $3 million to build, and anyhow, the Teamsters helped us out, and he got it built. So it was his vision, that what this part of the world had to offer would be world class, and he wanted to be part of it.
So in that time, I mean, the ship has evolved in so many different ways. Tell me about the engines. I mean, the engines are certainly different now than they would have been back in the early days.
Yeah, so we got Cooper Bessemer's, were the engines, which I believe weren't the ones they wanted, but they actually had to go for a cheaper version due to that cost issue. It turned out the Coopers were actually very good engines. They had no gear; they ran on a flywheel. So anyhow, they lasted to 204, and then we
Wow.
repowered her in 204, put in gears, and we have EMDs right now, and they're very good, and have been good. They go every 30,000 hours, which is about 9 years, when they get new power packs. So we've been on our third power pack there. So yeah.
But your latest assessment of that ship basically came back saying it's like a brand new ship. It's in ship shape, if you will.
Yeah. So what our Elliott Bay design is our marine architects, and they also do work for both Washington State and Alaska ferries, which again, quite often the Alaska ferries are really sons and daughters of what the Coho is, just a little bigger. And the Sydney and Tsawwassen for the BC ferries were also sons and daughters of the Coho. So they all came off a Phil Spalding design. But getting back to the in 2018, Alaska State was asking the Elliott Bay design to do a structural strength on some of their vessels that had been built in 64 and 72, I believe. And so we said we would like to have one too, to see how the Coho was. So when the Alaska boats tend to go through a little rougher seas, and especially the ones that go from Bellingham all the way up. So anyhow, we got ours done, and they said we were like brand new. So we had no structural issues. So we've got a very sound ship.
Yeah. How much has been done or has been able to be done to sort of green it, if you will, or make it a more sustainable, environmentally friendly model?
Oh, yeah. So in the late 70s, we put in an MSD room, which is a sewage treatment plant, which was basically we were ahead of the BC ferries on that. So we put that in. We've also had shore power on both sides somewhere in the late 70s. We're not too sure. And part of the reason that was happening was we, as you know, stay overnight in Victoria. So we land at 11 and then leave at 6. So at the time, we decided to put shore power in instead of running a generator. And in PA, we're there for 7 to 8 months a year, and have always had shore power. So we've had shore power as well. So we also are planning to put bow thrusters in, and starting that project this year, and hopefully have it done next year. And they will be battery powered by Corvus batteries, which were a Canadian company, started in BC, but they got bought out by a Norwegian firm. But looking forward to have that. But they will be battery powered, and those batteries will also back up our generators, so which will be good.
There is one very teeny tiny small marine border crossing point in the Maritimes in Canada, but this crossing here between Victoria and both Port Angeles and Seattle is the largest operating international marine border in Canada and the U.S. COVID had a big impact on that. We're going to talk about that next. Our guest on Chamber Chats today is Ryan Burles. Ryan is the president and chief operating officer of Ball Ferries. You and I got to know each other pretty well during the pandemic as we sort of came to the realization that the pandemic suspended service for you guys for how long?
20 months.
20
Yeah.
months.
Yeah.
That hurts, man. How do you get through that?
Well, we were very fortunate. For one, the province here is our landlord, and so they didn't request any any lease costs from day one. So that was good. On the other side, we did still have to pay the port because legally they were not allowed to. But basically, we and my partner Ryan Mullane, who did pass away just during COVID, which was a tragedy. He was 48. Was a big part of this. But he and we had hired a lobbyist over there, so we were able to get some government help from the U.S. on all federal programs. One came from a federal appropriated plan, which was for bus companies and ferries, and we were able to get about 3.8 million from that. And then we got some from the Port Angeles and the county, which was again federal money, but because the county looked at us as a private company doing public good, given what our link is to that region, and they were able to allocate us $1 million, and then the state, Washington State, allocated another 5 million to us, more in the same vein, due to our public good to the area. So had we had not that money, we would have not survived. We also got a loan, which was provided by the federal government there, and that's what kept us going for really almost 18 months, because we didn't get any other money till just near the end of COVID. So we're very, very fortunate and came out of it, still behind, but not nearly. We would have not survived. So.
Another conversation that your operation and our chamber were involved with was the Belleville terminal, which after 32 years, I think, of talking and advocating, it is going to be rebuilt, because without that, U.S. Border Services would have withdrawn service, meaning no more Clipper, no more Coho, and probably no pre-screening for cruise passengers, right?
Well, they, in some ways, no, because they would have either been here or in either Port Angeles or Victoria. So,
oh, I see. Yeah.
They would have either done post clearance. In the case of we had a choice. Actually, the operators had a choice, but for us, the footprint in Port Angeles is quite small to be able to do post clearance when you don't have pre-inspection like we do now. So yeah. We also had always said that we were committed to joining forces with the Clipper to have a multi-use terminal. So
yeah, so that's on its way. It's happening.
It is on its way. Yep.
The other thing that we got involved with, though, was the fact that when they reopened the border between Canada and the U.S., you could come by plane, you could come by road, you can come on a train or a bus. They didn't reopen the marine border. And we tried to figure out what that, because as I said a short time ago, we're really the only major international marine border crossing. So it was kind of off the radar, wasn't it? Or sonar, if you will, but it just wasn't there.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. No, I think there was some, I'm not sure why that was, and I don't think we will ever really know, but we usually don't push too hard on that. And we respected that it was not on the radar. Yeah. But you're completely right.
Yeah, we actually did the pushing on that. It's one of those circumstances where stakeholders made the snowball and we threw it. So we actually went to the Prime Minister's office to get an answer on that, and eventually it did come through. So let's talk about the numbers pre-pandemic and the passenger numbers now. How's that compare?
Yeah. Well, we're doing really well. We're considering 2019, we're about 5% above numbers in 2019. Our packaging numbers are like 30% better. We're very happy with our packaging, so we're doing better than pre-COVID. During COVID, it kind of depends when you want to look at it. But the first 3 months of COVID, we were pouring money out the door faster than you could say. But it did pick up for us quite quickly to be more like 70% what we would normally have. And then within about 10 months, we were starting to get where we were above 2019 numbers.
When you talk about packages too, that's something, it's another division of what you guys do. But if you want to take a trip to Washington State, or if Americans want to come here, you can pre-arrange packages for people to take care of experiences. So tell me about that.
Yeah. So in 208, as you might know, the Victoria Clipper had packaging, and we decided we'd give it a try. So we weren't sure if we could make it go, but we were now had, reservation system online and do it where it's can be done online and with also help from our staff. But we started in 208 and we slowly built it. And it was probably not till about 2014 that we really started to get some traction. But basically, we try to provide, choice, a fair price, really good value, and make it a one-stop shop. We have, answering phones. People would do a great job of explaining what we have. We have about 15 hotels in Victoria and about three hotels in Port Angeles an area, and then we have about I think it's about eight or nine attractions. So we sell over about 10,000 rooms a year in Victoria and about 3,000 over in the Olympic Peninsula. And it's continually growing. So we're very, very happy with what that's been done. And like other improvements, like we, through the years, we have put a gift shop in, and we have duty free on board, and we also have a Wi-Fi that generally does a good job, for the customer.
I can attest to that. And the chili on board's pretty good too, because I had some of that.
Yeah.
A really cool thing I saw, there was pets on board, so people are allowed that too. But what's the ratio, just to wrap it up here, what's the ratio of Canadian travelers versus American travelers?
It'd probably be for vehicles 65 to 70% American and 30%, 35 Canadian. And then when it comes to walk-ons, it's probably about 85 American and 15 Canadian. So, or not when I say Canadian and third country. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been around for all those years, since 1959. It's a part of our culture, it's a part of our waterways, and it's a part of life for so many of us, and it's a huge part of our tourist economy. Ryan Burles, thanks for your time, and thanks for all you do to support community in addition to traveling with the MV Coho Ferry. Thanks for being with us.
Hey, thank you, Bruce. Thanks for having me.
I'm Bruce Williams. We'll see you again for another Chamber Chat.